Welcome back to another episode of Credentialed alongside Justine Fernandez. I'm Jillian Mealy, and today we are talking about relationships. And I want to start this off, Justine, by asking, do you have any relationship goals for 2024?
Oh, that's a great question. I do. I did write some of them down in my New Year's goals. We talked about how we approach New Year's goals in another episode, and I did have a couple in there. One was to just make sure I spend more time cultivating them. I just got married, so obviously that relationship pretty important. The other goal that I wrote down for this year is to reconnect with a lot of folks who have helped me along the way. Sometimes you kind of get to where you need to go or life just takes over, you get really busy. And so I'd like to reconnect with some of the folks who took their time to mentor me, to pay it forward. So that was another thing that I wrote down that I wanted to do more of in 2024.
I like that. And for me, it's a bit of the same because 2023 was all about that change year for me that we obviously spent a lot of time talking about because it relates to a lot of these topics that we discuss. But changing careers, really having that personal growth year and having to, in some sense, hit pause on a lot of relationships because when you build a business and do something completely different, you're building from the ground up. And so for me, 2023 was that year where I had to say no to things, where I had to say, you know what, I can't go on that trip, where I had to say, I can't do that this weekend with school and with building a business. I had to hit pause on a lot. So for me, 2024 is going to be about hitting play again. I'm not quite there yet. I
Mhm.
think once March comes and I'm done with this MBA program, I'll have more time. But that is one of the big goals I have because I have found that doing this has been obviously very rewarding in terms of growth. It's been very rewarding in terms of my own personal time freedom. But I do miss those
Mhm.
relationships. I do miss going out and spending time with my friends. And so I need to do a bit more of that. But I also have a goal of just bettering myself. And I've been trying to do that a lot over the last few years. I've been very intentional in trying to do that. And I think for a while, I don't know if you have ever done this or felt this way, but I think when I got so caught up in work and in that work mode and that career mode and that, hamster wheel that just never stops, I was sort of just along for the ride and I was neglecting who I was in relationships and to people and for people. And it's not to say that I was a bad person or wasn't there for people because I absolutely was, but I wasn't finessing those relationships. I wasn't finessing who I was in them enough. And so 2024 for me is a year in which I want to really spend the time and do that.
And I think so many people forget to be intentional about it. And I have found in my life when I was intentional about it, it was super rewarding. So, similar year to yours in 2020 to 2021 is when I went to business school and when COVID happened. And so you really didn't see people. And I just had this feeling of disconnection from people I really cared about. So that year in my New Year's goals was to go visit and spend time with a lot of my close friends. And
Mm.
so I flew, for example, to DC to see one of my close friends who had since had a baby during COVID and I had not met the baby. That was one example of one thing I did and tried to see my really close friends. And let me tell you, that was so meaningful. Like, I'm so glad that I did that. I was intentional about it. I had that goal for myself because when you become an adult and you have multiple things vying for your attention, and work is everything now. We talked about work life balance and how you even begin to try to find it. You have to nurture those relationships. You're not in school
Absolutely.
or you're not in a setting where it's just organic. You have to put the time into them.
And going back to the whole friendships thing, and this episode isn't going to be all about friendships. We'll get into a lot of different topics as they relate to relationships. But 2020, after COVID hit, and I was in New York City and I was working. I mean, my gosh, it was like probably 3 or 4 months straight. I worked like 7 days a week because at that point, people were working from home and TV studios were being built in people's houses. And a lot
Hmm.
of people either didn't have access, couldn't come into the building, were sick, dealing with, COVID lockdowns and situations. And so I just ended up being one of the, folks who worked every single day for a while just to make it work for everybody. And this was about the time that I started to have these thoughts and feelings of, something's not right inside. We got into that, so I'm not going to deep dive into that right
Mhm.
now. But my girlfriends, like my best friends, were there for me in ways that I had never experienced before because I was reaching out to them in that vulnerable state, asking for help, asking for their opinion on things. And I don't know if I would have gotten through that time in my life the way I did without those girlfriends there for me.
Mhm.
My family was too, but there was something different about these relationships with friends who some I've known for a long time, some were friends for just a few short years, and now they're my best friends because they sort of went to
Mhm.
battle with me in my own life during that time. And so I walked away from those few years being like, wow, I did not quite realize how much these friendships and these relationships in our lives matter. And last year, same thing, when I was going through this career change, similar to you, I had reached out to a lot of people from different parts of my career who I haven't even spoken to in years. And it's like they went to battle with me during that phase, during that change phase
Mhm.
of my life. And seeing how many people are there for you when you really need it, it's just, it blows me away how many people don't reach out and ask for that help.
Mhm. It is so touching, and we all need that support. And I think that's the hallmark of a great friend is somebody who supports you no matter what and who cheerleads you, if that's a verb, which I think it is a
It is
cheerleader.
now.
It is now. Yeah, that's right. It's cheerleader for you and listens. I think
Mhm.
even just being listened to feels so good, especially when you're going through a hard time. And I think the thing about friends is family gets it. You'll never have anybody like your family, but your friends, for the most part, are in a somewhat similar life stage to you. They've gone through some of the same cultural things when they were at that age. For example, when Facebook came out,
Mhm.
you and your friends were all in a similar sort of age range and going through that experience together. And so they just get it a little bit more, where sometimes your family, especially like older family members, they don't quite get, well, why are you taking this for Instagram? You know what I mean? So friends are different and sometimes they just get it.
I also want to touch upon something because you just talked about the importance of listening. And there's a quote, and so I'm not gonna butcher it by trying to say the exact quote, but my version, my paraphrasing of the quote is, you should listen with the intent to understand, not the intent to respond or to
Mhm.
reply. And I didn't quite grasp how much that idea meant until COVID hit, truthfully, because I was in news during COVID. And once COVID started to sort of become politicized, like there was so much going on in all directions from all sides, and none of us truthfully really knew what was going on. This was the first time in my life I'd been in a pandemic, and I learned how valuable it is to just sit back and listen to understand. And when I finally learned what that meant, that was transformative in my own life because that bleeds over now into so many different relationships for
Mhm.
me.
Mhm. Yeah, and it was around the same time where I had similar reflections about listening was in business school because a professor said think about what you do most of. Are you talking or are you listening? And whichever that you're not doing more of, you should try to rid yourself of your usual pattern and do more. So in TV, you read and respond, you read and respond. You're always primed, which is a great skill. But
Hmm.
sometimes you don't then active listen. So, like, one of my goals in business school, and actually when I started this new career path in business, was to listen more because I was so used to, I mean, I was a host of a show. It's your whole
Yeah.
job to talk and to listen, respond, listen, respond. So that I think has transformed how I approach conversations, how I approach relationships. And also in my job, a lot of times business leaders, we are talking to them about active listening.
Mhm.
And active listening is listening to listen and parroting back, I heard you say this, or let me recap what I just heard from you. And
Mhm.
let me tell you, to be on the other end of that, to be listened to, feels really, really good.
Yep. I teach this to clients. I mean, that's one of the first things that we talk about. And Justine, I'm always blown away when you see that click in them, or when someone comes back to me like, "Oh my gosh, I tried this." I will sometimes challenge people and I'll say, "Okay, go to dinner with your friends or your family or, whomever, or just have a conversation, and don't do this if you're in a business setting, or just, with people close to you that you're comfortable with, to sort of that they can get it and follow along with you, but challenge yourself to listen to them so intently. And at the end of what they're saying, ask them a question about what they just said, instead of giving a response. Just ask a question. Just ask any follow-up question you can. Have two or three in your mind ready to go, and see how the conversation goes when someone else feels heard by you.
Mhm.
And they come back and they're like, wow. And it's transformative when you learn to communicate in that sense of not just responding, not being the one to, oh my gosh, I have to
Mhm.
get what I want to say in here. I have to respond, but to listen and ask questions and ask, what you talked about that when you told your Kobe story, how, Kobe asked if you were enjoying the game. He asked you a question, Kobe Bryant, we're talking about,
Mhm.
and it made your day and it made you feel good. And so I think that's such an important tool in communication and in relationships, is to be able to make each other feel heard.
Mhm. And if somebody disagrees with you on something, that's a really powerful way to have a great productive
Mhm.
conversation, is to get curious and to ask questions and listen with the intent to really listen, to have a really proactive dialogue.
So the question is then, because you just kind of referenced it in if you're disagreeing with somebody, but what happens if a relationship goes south? Like, what happens if a friendship goes south or a work relationship goes south? How do you handle that?
It's hard because sometimes you are really disappointed, that friendship or whatever happened
Mhm.
is no longer there, especially somebody you've spent some time with and considered like, oh, they were just going to be there. But I think as you get older, you realize like not all your friends are going to be there forever. This isn't elementary or high school where you kind of have this group of friends and they're there till you
Yeah.
graduate and you grow up together, etc. Um, I think maintaining professionalism, even if it's a friend, is really
Yeah.
important. And sometimes, like, I had a difficult situation at work where somebody disagreed with something, and we then had to work together the next day.
Mm.
And as soon as we like met up for the day, I just called it out and said, "Look, I know we disagree on this, but," and I was nervous. It was like a little shaky, which is to be expected. I was like, "But I
Yeah.
just want to move forward and I want to get through the day." And it cleared the air. And so then we were able to have a productive day. And sometimes I've also found that sometimes when you have a difficult situation at work, or you may disagree with something or something happens, that actually ends up bonding you later. Like if you are
Yep.
able to work through that and maintain your professionalism, that person, even if you disagreed at some point, will likely remember that. So always think like you are always, for whatever reason, you people are paying attention to your responses, your reactions, etc. If you can maintain your professionalism, level headedness, treat people kindly, people will likely remember that. And you may then in the future, a month, 2 months, 3 months from now, have no issues with that person. Like that same person that I worked with a while ago and had that happen. I mean, we're friends on LinkedIn. If something came up where I needed what they work on, like I would reach out to them. And it's no big deal. It's water under the bridge. That's work. You're going to disagree on things.
It's true. And I think it boils down to just remembering to treat people how you want to be treated. I think that's kind of the bottom line that sometimes we can often forget, because either you're in a moment where, your emotions are running high, or you're like, "No, I feel strongly about this," or whether it be work or relationship in your personal life. But I think just remembering how you want to feel is how you should treat other people and make them feel as well. And so at the end of the day, I think that's sort of the motto that I like throughout, and that's personal and that's work relationships. But I think that that runs the gamut for all of them.
Hmm. What about personal relationships? What have you found is really important and that you seek out, whether it be a friend or a significant other?
Really, I think for me, it's just it's that connection that is sort of indescribable, but it's trust. It
Hmm.
is that all parties can be vulnerable and be real with each other and be honest with each other. I've had friendships, some of my very best girlfriends. We've had moments where I haven't really like fought with my friends, but where you're just like, you're disagreeing on something or you're not getting along or you're just at a stage where you're annoying each other and you
Oh
sort
yeah,
of
I was
take a
going to say
break,
you're
right?
annoyed by
You're
somebody.
annoyed.
Yeah, it
Yeah, you're annoying each
happens.
other. So you sort of take like a pause for a few weeks. Or some of my best girlfriends, we've gone like a month or two without talking. And then like one of us picks up the phone and we're like, why didn't we talk the last 2 months? Like, that was stupid. But sometimes you just need that space. So for me, for friendships, it's people that I can do that with. It's people who understand, hey, I can't go on this trip because I just quit my career and I'm starting a business and financially this is the hardest year of my life and I just can't do that right now. Or hey, I tried to get time off work and they're denying my request, like I can't go. It's the friends who understand
Hmm.
that your intentions are good, but you, for whatever reason, can't make it happen. And that at the end of the day, like you're there to support each other. That support, that honest support for me is so important. And I guess when it comes to a partner, I mean, it's similar. Like when it comes to a relationship, a romantic relationship, like my boyfriend is the most supportive person on the planet. And I want to be able to give that back. Like he inspires me to do for him what he does for me. If I just said that right, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. And it's just being able to have trust in someone, in people, and be able to know that they've got your back and that you have that person there and that they're honest with you. I think it all boils down to like trust and honesty and support when it comes to
Hmm.
all relationships. What do you think?
Yes, I think a lot of what you said there. And I think for me also, maturity is emotional peace. And now
Mhm.
I'm at a point where I am not sacrificing my emotional peace. And I think the greatest gift my husband ever gave to me, and I've talked about this before with him, he is the most emotionally supportive man that I have ever met. When I am
Mhm.
upset about something or when I need to talk about something, he leans in and he says, "No, I want you to come to me with these things," which I haven't had in all of my relationships. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes we have a list of things that we want in a significant other. We want them to be attractive. We want them to have this education or this job or this work ethic. But let me tell you, it's he has all those things. Of course he does. But that kind of, he's amazing. That emotional piece, I didn't realize how important it was and how much I really needed it.
Yep.
And as I look beyond just him and at my friendships, that emotional piece has to be there. I don't need toxic. I don't need too much excitement. Excitement is great. And I think actually I've gone to therapy. So I've invested in understanding like how I am programmed to approach relationships and what are the things I need to fix.
Yep.
And I think a really powerful line my therapist said to me when I was going through the whole dating process was, "Are you excited or are you nurtured?" And I
Hmm.
had never thought about dating in that way. And once I did, it changed everything for me. And I think as I've gotten older, I'm in my 30s now, that emotional piece, it's huge.
You're not old, Justine.
I feel
I'm in
old.
my 40s. Talk to me then. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's so true though. And I think a lot of it really is knowing who you are and what you need and what you bring to the table, sort of knowing your strengths and weaknesses in relationships and knowing what you have to offer and what you need in return. I think is such a big thing that I don't think a lot of people spend time thinking about the specifics of who they are, who they want to be, what they need. Like you said, you went to a therapist and that opened your eyes to a lot of things. For me, when I was up in New York, like I most people don't know this, but I spent years like not dating because, well, I was working really hard and it
Mhm.
was COVID for some of it. And I was working 7 days a week, but also because I needed to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be for other people. And I write a lot. I've told you this. I'm in the process of writing what I hope will be a book that will be published one day. And so I've spent a lot of time writing over the last few years, and through that, I've really learned a lot about myself. And I know exactly my strengths and exactly my weaknesses in relationships, friendships, and romantic. Like, I know where I stand in that sense. I know my struggles and I know where I excel. And I think that's what's so great when you finally get to that point where you have clarity in that sense,
Mhm.
is you can work on things and foster that growth for yourself and for others in your life that it's really hard to do when you're just unaware that you need it.
Mhm. Mhm. That self-awareness is so huge.
Mhm.
And I think once you get to that point of not only just understanding yourself, but also loving yourself, it sounds so cliche, but it is so true. Like nobody can love you, whether it be a friend, a significant other, unless you really love you and you really love the life you have right now. And with or without a significant other or a close friend or whatever you want at that time, that's when you start to really unlock some great things. They say it comes unexpectedly. And it really does because it's unexpected because you've done that self-exploration, you've fallen in love with who you are, what you stand for. You're willing to end friendships that no longer serve you or
Mhm.
with people who don't see maybe who don't have the same beliefs as you and is kind of hindering your growth. And that's when you get to a point where I think you start to unlock some really really great relationships.
And that's a point that's worth mentioning too, is it's okay over the years to part ways with some people who aren't serving what you need in your life, who aren't the best fit for your life. I've had to do that. I know you've had to do that. We've briefly touched upon it, but there are people I've had to walk away from just because they weren't bringing that energy I need into my life. They weren't making me my best version of myself, or they were bringing out the worst in me. And that can go both ways. I mean,
Mhm.
we always have fault in that situation ourselves too, but I just have had to, over the years, walk away from some relationships that weren't the right energy for my life. And that's hard to do, whether it be a friendship, whether it be, a romantic relationship. It's hard to walk away from anybody who's been a part of your life. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? I need to fulfill my personal growth goals. And that has to be the most important, I think, is to be able to foster that relationship with yourself. In order for you to be the best version of yourself, at least I feel this way, I need to have the right energy and the right people surrounding me.
Mhm.
And if I don't have that, then it just feels off to me.
You have to surround yourself with people, I think, who make you feel good. And everybody's definition of that, everybody's
It's different.
list of people who do that for you is different. Everybody needs something different too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we started this in the beginning with like, what are our relationship goals for 2024? What would you say is the most important relationship, I guess, piece of advice or tidbit of information that you've discovered along the way that you're putting forth now in 2024 as
Mhm.
you go step by step and accomplish these goals?
It's a good question. I think I had a lot of tidbits in there, and I'm just going to share a line that I think I I've been in my job for like 2.5 years or so, that I've picked up at that job. How can I support you? It is 4 words and it is huge.
Hmm.
So and it's also active listening because you're listening, hey, if somebody's stressed or has something going on at home or what else. Man, does it feel good to hear on the other end, how can I support you?
I
Whatever
love
you're
that.
going through. And it's a small line, but I think it's really powerful.
I really love that. You can use that in any relationship in your life. There's actually something that is on that line that's just not those words, that one of my best friends said to me a few weeks ago. And she said that she and her fiance, I'm not going to name names, but that she and her fiance, each day they'll give a number and it's like, what level are you at today? And it's a number between 1 and 10, 10 being the greatest, 0 being like, oh man, I'm in it. I'm having a day. And instantly when you hear that person's number, like if you hear your partner or your friend or whomever say, hey, I'm at a 4, you're like, okay, you know what? I gotta be the 8. Like I gotta bring you up, or I gotta be the 10.
Mhm.
I gotta bring this up. Just hearing that number in itself, when like that tells you everything, I think, about someone's mood, about what they're going through that day, about how their day was, how much they're struggling. And when you care about somebody, whoever this person may be to you, when you hear just something as simple as a number that might be
Mhm.
low, implying they're having a tough time right now, like instantly, I've enacted that in some of my relationships and some of my friendships already.
Mhm.
Hearing that, I think, is enough to be like, all right, you know what? I'm picking up the pace. Like I'm going to bring us both up. I'm going to help you. And that is essentially what you're saying. Like you're lifting that person up then. You're giving that person your support. And
Mhm.
I think that's so powerful for us to do for someone else and for us to receive.
Yeah, and to create the space to check in emotionally. I
Mhm.
think we are so caught up in going to this meeting and going to that meeting. And sometimes you can sense it on calls, and we don't create the space to do that. To say, hey, how is everybody coming into this call? Like when you're kind of sensing maybe people are tired or something's off. And that's what I love about that number is it kind of does that in a way that feels really organic.
Yeah. It's so simple. Like I can't tell you how many times already just in the last few weeks, like I look at someone, I'm like, I'm at like a 5 right now. And they're like, all right, what do we got to do to pick you up? Or vice versa. It's so easy, but it has really transformed how I view sort of that challenge of lifting someone up or having someone else lift you up, and that not the challenge really, but the balance of the lift.
It's so good. Maybe I'll have to start using that.
Yeah,
Especially to
please.
start the year because I feel like post holidays, everybody's coming in at a 2, 3, 4, 5. But you know what? We can only go up from here.
You know what? I am at a 10 right now because I love doing this with you and having these conversations.
That's right. No, right now energy is good. Good peoples.
Well, I hope on that note, everybody else listening is at a 10 right now. And if you're not at a 10, then, pick whoever's around you that you trust and that you love and that you have that, honest, vulnerable relationship with. And don't be afraid to tell them, like, hey, I'm at a 3. Hey, I'm at a 4. Like, help me out a little bit, because I think sometimes so many of us keep that in, and, you have people to go to. So if you're lucky enough to have those people to go to, take advantage of them, because that is what they're there for.
So true. Support is huge. And we thank you guys for your support too. That's a piece of this
Absolutely.
and feeling supported enough to have this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So, another one in, another episode of Credentialed. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.